Chapter 14 Show Must Go On Part 1 I've seen fire, and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again. Lincoln never set up his alarm clock for the weekends unless he had something really important to do. So it was definitely not the alarm clock that woke him up. At first, he wasn't really sure about what had actually woke him up. For a beautiful minute, he thought that he was still dreaming, because with his closed eyes he felt that he was in such a wonderful place that could not simply be real. Like floating in a sea of warmth and tranquility. He ignored which was the average heartbeat per minute ratio, but he was pretty sure that he was well below that line. He was feeling each breath, every single heartbeat, and oddly enough, he somehow felt like he was a little kid once again. A little while later, in what felt like it was half an hour, but that probably wasn't much more than 2 minutes, Lincoln's senses started to sharpen, and he finally decided to open his eyes. The first thing he was able to see was that was indeed his bedroom, on his own bed. And then, he immediately realized that that wonderful warmth he felt was because he wasn't alone under his blankets. Lynn was lying beside him, awake, staring at him. She had bloodshot eyes and her cheeks were wet. "Lynn, are you okay?" he asked her, sitting up without even telling her good morning. She smiled and wiped her tears with the blanket, sitting up as well. "Yeah, I'm sorry," she said, trying to calm him down. "I woke up a while ago and you look so relaxed. I didn't want to wake you." "You didn't," Lincoln assured her, as he saw her holding her loose brown hair with a hand while she actually looked for a pigtail band. "That's fantastic, actually." "Me too," she said, finally getting her usual hairstyle done. They smiled at each other. Lincoln had really enjoyed a great night of sleep. Just like the previous night with Luann, having slept with one of his sisters had kept him from having nightmares. He felt safe, content, and it helped him to have a placid, uninterrupted night of sleep. Although, now that he thought about it, he had awakened in the middle of the night. It had been one... His smile faded suddenly. He unconsciously looked beyond his closed door, across the hall, and into the last door to the right, just before reaching the bathroom. He tried to look into his two older sisters' room, into Luann and Luna's room. He remembered everything that had happened in the early morning, when Luna came back really late from a concert, and she and Lori had what Lincoln considered was the most serious fight he had ever witnessed between any of his siblings. Not even that time when Lori and Lenny had bought the same dress things had escalated so bad. It had not been a physically violent fight. They hadn't even touched each other, which was amazing considering they all lived in a house where everything was quickly arranged through a fistfight. But what Luna had done hurt more than any punch or kick. He didn't know what had happened to push his older sister to act like that. He noticed that she had been a little dizzy due to the alcohol, and he had heard her say that she'd done things that a boy never wants to hear from his sisters, things that broke his heart. But nothing could compare with the image of his sister smashing her favorite guitar on the floor. He remembered the hurt look he'd seen in her red eyes when she looked across her sibling's face, the silent plea she gave him when their eyes met. He tried to tell her that she was wrong, that she shouldn't believe what Lori had said, that he understood her. But either he didn't manage to do it, or wasn't enough for her. Luna destroyed her favorite guitar. It wasn't the first time she'd smashed a guitar, but there were always older instruments that needed repairs anyway. She would never do that with Chloe, which he always cleaned after every session, and never in the context of a big fight with Lori. Lori. What had happened with her? The way she tried to lecture Luna? Lincoln knew that his own knowledge about his sister's psychology could only be rivaled by Lori's, who could probably even have more tricks up her own sleeve than even Lincoln when it comes to dealing with siblings. There was no way that she had said all those things without knowing it would hit a nerve in Luna. Was she trying to provoke her? No. No. Lincoln had heard the regret in her voice when she realized what she had said. He saw her arguing with her parents so they would leave Luna alone in her room. What had happened then? Actually, what was Lori doing awake at 2 in the morning in the first place? "You're going to talk with her, aren't you?" asked Lynn, taking him out of his train of thought. "Of course I am. I would have gotten there last night, but it was okay to give her some room to herself. She wasn't in the condition to talk with you," she cautiously said. Lincoln remembered his older sister's state when she arrived home, and he felt his stomach stir. "I just can't believe it. Luna! With a stranger! Really?" "I know. I guess we're all doing stupid things lately," said Lynn, avoiding his eyes. He looked at her with sympathy. He clearly would have preferred it if Lynn hadn't punched one of her classmates until leaving him almost unconscious, running away from school, trying to fight with her sensei, and crying her eyes out, blaming herself for his terrible destiny. He would have preferred it if none of that had happened. But at the same time, he couldn't avoid feeling a little happy for having had the chance to spend a whole afternoon with her, to know her better. He was also thankful that Lynn had faked having lost a ball to stage a fight with Lucy so she could have had an excuse to bunk with him for the night without raising suspicions. The experience had been better than he had expected it to be. She hadn't done anything violent. She hadn't locked him inside any Dutch oven. She didn't even snore. He didn't have to worry about giving explanations about his Operation Farewell. She tried to conceal the looks she gave at his calendar and the bucket list on his wall. She said nothing about it and pretended like there was nothing unusual in his room, and he really appreciated that. "So," started Lynn, sounding slightly interested, "you actually know about—" He turned around to look at her. Judging by her tone and the hand gesture she was doing, he knew she was talking about what Luna had said she'd done. He stared at her with a raised eyebrow. "I'm 11 years old, not 6. "Yeah, right, of course. Sorry. It's just that, I don't know. I'm always seeing you like my little bro. I didn't realize that you were already around that age." Lincoln felt his cheeks blushing and warming up. "Why, yes, I know about that," he said. He looked away to the wall and said nothing else. This was something she was fond of talking with his sisters. Mumbled Lynn in a funny tone. "Now I see why you didn't want me, a girl, to sleep with you." "Okay, you made it awkward. I'll hit the showers," he said, his whole face red, as he tried to sit up and leave his room. "No, wait!" She was faster and quickly embraced his right arm, stopping him from leaving. She actually didn't need to hold him. The desperation he heard in her voice was enough to stop him dead in his tracks. The day before, he found a new facet of Lynn, one that he was still having troubles getting used to. It wasn't easy to see her so vulnerable, so sensitive, so desperate to be with him to the point where she had practically jumped at the mere possibility of Lincoln walking away from her. She looked like she was about to cry. I'm sorry. I was just messing with you, little bro," she said, tightening her grip on his arm even more. "Don't leave me, please. Not yet." His young and wounded heart shivered with his sister's plea. Very carefully, he turned around and put his free arm over her shoulders. Feeling him changing positions, she also moved, wrapping her arms around him just below his ribcage, letting her head rest against his chest. Even though he was 2 years older, Lincoln was actually a good 2 inches taller than her. Her long auburn hair helped her dissimulate the difference, but they both knew he was taller. He had teased her about it when he realized it, earning himself a good punch in the shoulder. But he wasn't fully aware of it up until that moment when she hugged him in his own bed. It was right then when he saw her as small. He hugged her too, and softly stroked her hair. "It's okay, Lynn. I'm not leaving you. I will never leave you," he promised her. He hated with all of his heart that he was able to recognize the breathing of a crying person. He was getting too much experience on it for his taste. Are you?" and started, but she had to cough a little and take a couple deep breaths before she could gather enough strength to talk. Will we have another moment like this? Lynn, of course we'll. Please, she interrupted him. I know I can't keep you from myself. We all love you, but she started energetically shaking her head, as if the simple movement could take her fears away. I don't want this to be the last time I wake up and you're with me. He cursed himself when he recognized his own breathing as that of a crying person. He assured her that he had no intention of that being the last time they would have a one-on-one time. He told her that he still had time, and he was determined to make the best of it. So don't worry. I'll still teach you my cooking skills and how to polish your nails, and you can come and sleep with me whenever you want, he told her with a smile. But today I have some things to do. She nodded. You need to talk with Luna. That's just one thing. Lincoln sighed, looking exhausted at his calendar. Luann is helping me with a project. I need to give Lisa a report. I want to keep advancing on some stuff with Mom. I promised I would hang out with Clyde and Ronnie Ann today. And I haven't spent much time with Ronnie Ann, she suddenly said, breaking away from his embrace to look him in the eye. Are you really going to keep seeing that? Her fist was clenched tight and her fierce eyes were locked in Lincoln's eyes. The one that she had seen a little swollen just the night before. Lincoln couldn't help himself and grinned, which only infuriated Lynn even more. I appreciate that you're worried about me, he said, flattering her as quickly as possible to calm her down. It worked. But it was all a misunderstanding, really. She's deadly worried about me, you know. It's just that, well, she also finds it easier to express herself through her fist. The comparison evidently bothered Lynn a little. You two could end up being really good friends, you know, he teased her. She quickly realized his intention and finally relaxed. Fine. I'll allow you to hang out with her. But tell her that if she wants to show you her love, this time she should just settle with a smooch. She laughed, extremely pleased to see Lincoln's face turn 5 shades of red in a matter of seconds. How bad is it? Lincoln asked in her low voice. Luann shook her head, holding her hands against her breastbone. When I woke up, she was already finishing her shower. She then went back into our room and started to put away all her instruments, one by one. I tried to stop her, but she closed her eyes and Lincoln saw her shivering. She smiled at me, she finally said. She smiled and told me not to worry about it. But she looked, I don't know, Lincoln. It scared me. Lincoln closed her eyes and massaged his temples. Almost the whole family had already went downstairs to have breakfast. He had been left behind because he went into Lisa's room to have his morning doses of the antidote, and when he came out he spotted Luann also leaving her room, looking crestfallen. After making sure that there was nobody else upstairs, Lincoln stopped Luann and asked her about Luna, who had apparently decided that she was not going to have breakfast. Things were already getting complicated. Definitely. Lincoln didn't want to waste any time. Can you cover for me? He asked his sister. I'll try to talk with Luna. Luann nodded and wished him luck, giving him a big hug and a kiss on his forehead. She left him alone, and Lincoln quickly walked to his sister's room. He opened up the door, and even before he spotted Luna sitting in a chair in front of the window, he knew that everything was simply messed up. The silence was painfully revealing, but that wasn't all. She wasn't wearing her boots and her wristbands anymore. She wasn't playing any instrument, and she didn't have her headphones on. She was just simply sitting in a chair, with her arms resting on the window ledge and her gaze lost somewhere far away. Lincoln took a deep breath and called her. Luna? If it wasn't for the fact that he had heard her holding her breath before releasing it in a big sigh that would have made Lucy jealous. He might have believed that she hadn't hurt him. "Luna, look at me," he asked her, putting a hand on her shoulder. Slowly, Luna turned around and looked at him. Lincoln had never seen anything like it. It was like her eyes had lost the ability to glow. They showed no emotion, just an immense feeling of abandonment and desperation. For a moment, Lincoln felt like he would never have enough words to describe what he was seeing, that there was nothing he could say to make it better. But he had to try. "Why did you do that?" he asked her, sounding slightly reproachful. "Why did I do what?" "Everything. Getting drunk, coming home so late, and what you told Lori about that guy." Luna closed her eyes and ducked her head. "You probably hate me right now. You must think that I'm—" "Of course not," Friendly said. "Luna, I don't judge you. But you know the risks. If you didn't use protection, then..." "Despite what Lori might think," she interrupted him, sounding not upset, but disappointed. Disappointed with herself. "I'm not a reckless idiot. Our family's not getting bigger, Lincoln." A huge weight was taken off his shoulders. It was not that he didn't trust her, or that he thought she was an idiot. But Lincoln knew very well that people, when feeling desperate, usually make big mistakes. A part of him was relieved, but there were still so many things worrying him. "Why did you smash your favorite guitar?" He saw her shivering, and he knew right away that she was still hurt about that. It hadn't been something easy for her. Clearly wasn't what she wanted to do. But then, why did she do it? "Because I won't be needing it anymore." "What are you talking about?" "I'm not playing anymore. No more music for me." "What? Why did you do that?" "To show you that there's more in Luna Loud than just music." "Luna, no one thinks you're just music." "Of course you do, Lincoln!" She snapped back, standing up and walking to her closet, looking for nothing in particular. "You can say whatever you want, but deep down you all think music is all that matters to me, that everything I think is rock-related, and that I don't care for anything besides music. My music. Lori said it herself last night." "She didn't say all those things. And what she did, she didn't mean it." "She totally meant it!" Luna yelled, looking hurt that she said so. "That's what she really thinks of me. What everyone thinks. But no one dares to say. Luna, this is all my fault." Luna's face suddenly relaxed. She stared at him, dumbfounded, utterly surprised. "What do you mean?" "There's so many things I need to tell you all. So many things I need to clear out with each one of you," said Lincoln, sitting on Luann's bed. "But I just can't be with all of you at the same time. I just spoke with Luann and Lynn. Lucy, Lana, and Lola don't even know what's going on. If I had been paying attention to you, if only I would have spent more time with you, maybe none of this would have happened." Luna sat down next to him and gently embraced him. "No, Lincoln. This is not your fault. Don't say that. It's my fault. I'm the one who made you think I'm just music." "But Luna, you can't just quit on your music," Lincoln told her, grabbing her hand. "You're a music prodigy. You can't just drop it. Music is what you love the most, what you truly enjoy." He felt his sister's hand tensing, and the look she gave him had a mixture of pain and a pinch of anger. "That's exactly what I'm trying to stop you from believing," she said, gritting her through gritted teeth, with her eyes closed in an attempt to avoid crying. "Music is not what I love the most, Lincoln. I can live without music. There are some things I can't live without. Things that give my life meaning. Things without which it makes no sense to go on." "Like what?" he honestly asked. He really wanted to know what his sister was talking about. He felt like he was about to find out a new facet of Luna, just like he found out about Lynn wanting to learn how to cook. He thought he was about to find out a hidden depth about another one of his sisters. Luna, however, didn't answer him. Not with words, at least. She only stared at his eyes, with his lower lips trembling, as she raised a hand and barely touched his cheek, a slight brush with the tip of her fingers, tickling him. He didn't laugh, though, because he realized what she was talking about. She was talking about him. What can an 11-year-old boy, whose life is slowly slipping away from him, say when his older sister tells him that what she loves the most, and that there's no point in going on without him? How can he reply to such a confession? How to tell her that she shouldn't believe that? How to promise her that everything's gonna be alright? He would have loved to be able to reply to something like that, but he didn't know what to say. In a way, it was a relief when she stood up and turned away from him. "Go and have breakfast," she said, not looking at him. "But don't stay here with me. I want to. I promised Lola I would go to her tea party today, too. So what? I'll tell her that we can... Lincoln! Please." She interrupted him, still facing at the opposite wall. "Don't make me cry. It hurts. It hurts so much." Had he been a good brother, then he would have stayed there with her. He would have made her come around. He would not have rested until she felt better. He would have offered her a shoulder to cry on. He would have whispered the right words. He would have helped her carry all the pain she was undoubtedly feeling. But he was selfish. He didn't feel like he was ready to do it, to suffer again with her. For 5 days in a row, all he had been doing was suffering. In the hospital, with his siblings and parents, and then with Bobby, Clyde, with Adrian's death, Ronnie Ann, Luann, and Lynn. It was all pain. His heart felt numb just by thinking in all that he had suffered this week, and all the pain that he was yet to experience. He was weak. He chose the easy path, slowly nodded, and left his older sister, grieving in her room, all alone, just as he walked downstairs to join the family breakfast. He hated himself for doing that. Any idea for this chapter's title, son? Lincoln spent an awful time trying to come up with a name for the last chapter his mother helped him write. To narrate his experiences and what he learned from them was pretty easy. His mother had the hardest part, taking notes and then having to write it all down in a way that ended up being well written, while still maintaining Lincoln's particular view of the matter. But choosing each chapter's title was becoming more and more complicated as they kept writing them. In just a few hours, the two of them had finished another 3 chapters, and his mind was tired after coming up with undue pressure, changing the baby, and serial killer. I don't know. What about Toads and Tiaras? Is it too dumb? He asked, tired of everything. I think it's perfect, son, Rita told him with a smile. It perfectly summarizes those two. Lincoln smiled too, but then he looked aside. Honey, what's wrong? His mom asked, leaving her notebook aside and sitting next to her son. They were both in her bedroom, where no one would bother them, knowing very well the fact that everything they said could be heard through the vents. Lincoln had set up a music player, so no one could accidentally or intentionally hear what he and his mother were saying. Nothing, he said. You're thinking about Luna, aren't you, sweetheart? His mom could be deceived every once in a while, but she had a superpower that allowed her to quickly detect and identify any problem in one of her children. Deep down, Lincoln knew that he wouldn't be able to hide his thoughts from her for too long. You shouldn't ground her. Rita sighed. It's not her fault, he continued. She didn't mean to do what she did. We're not going to ground her, honey, she said, stroking his white hair. She's old enough to realize that what she did cannot be repeated. She knows it's wrong. Besides, I think she's already punishing herself hard enough. She couldn't say much more. Someone knocked on the door, and a second later Lucy walked into the room. Lincoln couldn't help but smile. This must have been the first time he ever saw his little sister casually walking into a room. Usually she simply appeared there, opening portals from another dimension, or walked through walls apparently. But even she had to ask permission before entering her parents' bedroom. "Yes, Lucy?" asked Rita, standing up. "Clyde and Ronnie Ann are ringing the doorbell," she simply said. Her eyes were hidden behind locks of hair, but even so Lincoln was perfectly sure that his little sister was scrutinizing the whole room, analyzing everything. The way she slightly moved her head was a giveaway for Lincoln that Lucy had seen the music player against the vents, and that she had also probably spotted the open notebook on the bed. "Thank you, Lucy," he quickly said, wanting to take her out from there as soon as possible. "I'll go hang out with them then, Mom. See you later." He left the room along with his sister and closed the door behind them. "What were you doing there?" she monotonously asked. "Oh, she just needs some ideas for her novel, and I offered myself to help her, you know." "Why'd you put music so we couldn't hear you from the bathroom vents?" "So you actually tried to spy on us from the bathroom vents?" Lincoln asked her, with a slightly reproachful look. Lucy realized what she had just slipped from her mouth, and after a few shocking seconds where she simply stood there with her mouth wide open, she ran away from him. Lincoln saw her going upstairs. Lucy knew something was odd. There was no doubt about it. He couldn't keep her in the dark for too long, but he had just so many things to worry about right now that he couldn't even really focus on that particular matter. He opened the door and found his two best friends waiting for him. They were standing 5 feet from each other, doing everything they could to keep their eyes from meeting. Lincoln found about their little altercation from 2 days ago. Apparently they hadn't talked about it yet, and they decided to let their differences aside so the three of them could enjoy an afternoon together. His smile returned when he thought about his friends. He wouldn't trade them for the world. "Hey guys," he greeted them. "Hello, Lincoln." "What's up, lame-o?" Their words were the same as always, the same they used to greet each other every other day. But Lincoln noticed a different attitude in them. Clyde had barely bumped his fist, and Ronnie Ann was staring at him like he was about to faint. His two friends were actually looking at him like he was a fragile porcelain figure, a delicate model that they needed to keep an eye on to keep it from falling and breaking. He felt a little awkward for being treated like a child, but he knew that it was their way of worrying about him. He didn't blame them. They started to walk, not knowing where to go yet. He was walking between his two friends, and apparently they weren't the only ones acting a little weird. Before they even reached the sidewalk, Clyde asked him, "Lincoln, did something happen? You look concerned." He sighed. "It wasn't my best night," he resignedly said, looking at the ground and putting his hands into his pockets. "Do you want to talk about it?" Ronnie Ann asked, putting a hand slightly above his elbow. Lincoln looked at her, and then at Clyde. She had asked him, but he knew that they wouldn't simply let him pretend there was no big deal. He sighed again, and told him that he would tell them all about it when they reached a more private, quiet place. That private, quiet place ended up being, as usual, the nearest park. They found this little spot under a tree shadow. They had a concrete table and 2 concrete benches. Lincoln sat on one of the benches. Clyde sat right in front of him, on the other side of the table, and Ronnie Ann decided to sit right there to the white-haired boy, only that she'd sat on the table with her feet on the bench, unlike the other two who used the public facilities the way they were meant to be used. Now a little more relaxed beneath the shadow, and knowing that they were away from the main path to not be disturbed, Lincoln told him all that happened the night before in the house. Well, he didn't tell them all of it, actually. He decided to skip the part of what Luna had said because he didn't want none of his friends to think less of his sister, fearing that they would judge her. He told them what they needed to know. That Luna, just like the rest of his sisters, was devastated. That she had decided to go and give a concert in a bar. That she had drank more alcohol than she could manage. And that she had arrived home at 2 a.m. He told him about the argument with Lori, about how Luna smashed her favorite guitar, in that little conversation they both had just a few hours ago before breakfast. She says that she doesn't want to play her guitar anymore because she's tired of everyone thinking music is all that defines her, he finished. He opened his mouth and as if to say something else, but he quickly closed it. His friends were looking at him with worried looks. But you don't think that's true, don't you? Asked Clyde, carefully measuring his words, fearing that he might be wrong about his assumption. Lincoln couldn't stop his lips from forming a fleeting grin. His best friend could definitely read him like an open book. No, I don't think that's the reason she does it. I'm not saying she's lying, there's probably a bit of what she says in it, but I think the truth is more complicated than that. A little uncomfortable, he looked away to his right, seeing the little kids in the playground having fun with their friends, their siblings and parents, laughing and enjoying a nice Saturday afternoon. Then what do you think it is? Asked Clyde once again, after the silence became long enough to become uncomfortable. Lincoln didn't answer right away. He had this idea in his mind, but it was difficult for him to find the right words to express himself. He was usually a very eloquent kid, but it seemed like it was hard to express himself with clarity when it was about his serious problems with his sisters. See, Luann told me that lately Luna was having trouble playing her songs, that she would stop in the middle of a jam, unable to continue, and that she seemed like she was always about to start crying. And today, when I tried to talk with her, she told me something that he started to move his hands in front of them, trying to gesticulate what he was about trying to say, but he couldn't come up with the right words. I don't know. I think like she doesn't want to play anymore because music is not distracting her. Her songs are reminding her. Well, they're reminding her about me. Both his friends shivered when they heard those words, but Lincoln decided to ignore them. She has always used music like a screen to cover her problems, like a masquerade. She always hid behind it to stop thinking about her problems, to abstract herself from whatever makes you hurt, to run away from her problems, you know? But I guess this time she can't simply avoid this problem. My theory is that she's trying to stop thinking about the fact that I'm going to die. I don't know. But she can't do it. That's how she always faced her problems. And now that she can't do it no more, she doesn't know what to do. I think that's what's tearing her apart. You can't blame her, Lincoln, Clyde softly said. We're all trying to deal with this in our own way. He started to breathe more quickly, trying to stay strong for his friends and avoid crying. I know, said Lincoln in a defeated tone. I get it. I swear I understand her. But I just don't know how I can help her. I don't know what can I do to make her feel better. If I'm right, and I'm pretty sure I am, she's doing all this stuff to keep the pain away. But how can I help her to stop running away from her pain? Clyde tried to say something, but he had no idea what to say to him. He closed his mouth and looked down. Lincoln looked away too. He wasn't really expecting them to give him any answer to his questions. He was just saying out loud what was bothering him, his most immediate problem. The problem with the man with the plan. That's how he referred to himself so many times. And yet, now that it really mattered, now that things were in a critical stage, he didn't know what to do. He couldn't simply die and leave his sister like that. He couldn't allow himself to leave this world if there was one of his older sisters giving up her dreams and her passions. He had to help her, but he didn't know what he could do. He was so focused in his own thoughts that he was taken by surprise when Ronnie Ann spoke right next to him. When my mom died, I didn't cry. Lincoln and Clyde immediately looked up. Ronnie Ann still sitting on the table, was looking at the ground, avoiding making eye contact with the boys. Lincoln nervously gulped. It was the first time he heard Ronnie Ann talking about her mother. Through Lori, he knew that both Ronnie Ann and Bobby's mom had died 2 years ago in a car accident. He had always been careful enough to keep himself from mentioning anything that could trigger Ronnie Ann by reminding her of her mother. He could see how sorrowful his friends seemed to be. He was about to tell her that she didn't have to talk about it if she didn't want to. But she spoke first. My dad and Bobby, they cried a lot, and I felt terrible too, like completely empty. But I just couldn't cry. Not when I got to the hospital, not when they told us the news, not even the funeral. For weeks, I was so sad, but not that much. This sounds crazy, right? How can I not be devastated from my mom's death? I should have been crying non-stop, but it wasn't like that for weeks. I couldn't cry for her. And then, her shoulders started to convulse, and Lincoln acted immediately. He stood up and hugged her. She wrapped her arms around her and dragged him closer as some tears escaped her eyes. Clyde also stood up, surrounded the table, and stopped right next to them. Not knowing what to do, he simply put a hand on Ronnie Ann's shoulder, gently stroking her arm. One day, I was skating in the park, getting the sickest air, she said, resuming her story. It was all good, as always, until I saw this 4-year-old girl falling from her rollers, and her mom came running and helped her stand. And as soon as I saw that, it was like someone broke a dam inside me. I felt sick. I ran to the loneliest bush I could find. I hid behind it, and I cried. She sank her face in Lincoln's shoulders, and her fists clenched his shirt. I cried, and I cried, and I cried all the tears I've been holding up all those weeks. I felt terrible. I felt like there was no point in living without my mom. I called Bobby and asked him to pick me up, and I cried with him too. Those were hours crying, Lincoln. Hours. Never in my entire life had I cried so much as that day. After that, she needed a few minutes to catch her breath, to pull herself together. Lincoln and Clyde patiently waited for her to recompose herself. Lincoln didn't let her go, and he kept softly caressing her back. When she finally felt she was all right, she broke away from her hug, and Lincoln sat beside her on the table, holding her hand. I can't remember ever feeling worse than that. Just to think about that day hurts. She made a small pause to take a breath, and Lincoln gently squeezed her hand to assure her that he was there for her. But from that day on, I finally could accept what had happened. All those weeks, I didn't cry. I'd been lying to myself. It's not something I did on purpose, but I was deceiving myself. My psychologist said it was something my mind did to save me the pain, but, Lincoln softly asked, not wanting to rush her. Ronnie Ann finally looked him in the eye. We can't always escape our pain. There are some things that will always hurt us, and we can't keep them from doing that. And sometimes, you need to let it hurt. They stayed in silence, and Lincoln started to process all his friend had just told him. It wasn't exactly a comforting reflection. It looked more like a resignation, to stop trying to avoid the pain, accepting there was nothing they could do, and let it hurt. He didn't want that. He wanted a magic solution that would allow him to fix everything with Luna, that would help him make her feel good, to keep her from crying, to save her from all that pain. He really wanted something like that. But in spite of his innocence and optimism, he knew he was asking too much. He knew that the death of a loved one was a serious issue, and it couldn't be taken upon lightly. It wasn't something one could downplay, or try to not be affected by it. In his worst moments, he had sometimes imagined how would he feel if one of his own sisters was going through what he was experiencing. And the idea of living something like that made him cry more than anything. Maybe Ronnie M was right. Maybe what Luna needed was to stop trying to avoid her pain. Except there was nothing they could do. And let it hurt. He didn't want that. He wanted... Maybe Ronnie M was right. To stop looking for a way to get distracted and not think about it. Maybe what Luna needed was to accept the pain. By helping her realize that, he may stop her from doing dangerous things that get distracted. If he thought it like that, Lincoln would feel a little less guilty. If by letting her cry, he could keep her from doing something stupid that could endanger her, then that was a price he was willing to pay. But that still left him with the music problem. How could he help her with that? Unless... Lincoln's eyes glowed with realization. An idea crossed his mind, and he caught it before it faded away. The idea started to gain shape, and it soon became a plan. Certainly, Lincoln thought he'd find the answer. It was a practical idea, easy to accomplish, with big chances of leaving an impact on Luna, which is what he wanted in the end. To do this, however, he needed a little logistics, a little preparation or help in an area that wasn't his specialty. He started to mentally go over everyone he knew, looking for someone that could help him, and suddenly he realized whom to call. It was perfect. He smiled. He smiled widely, feeling content with himself, and his friends noticed his change of attitude. "You came up with a plan, didn't you?" Clyde asked, looking at him with a raised eyebrow. "Yeah," he happily said, tightening his grip on Ronnie Ann's hand. "Yes, I came up with something. I think I know what I can do to help Luna. If I try my best, then I can do this. I can do it tonight. I just need to practice, and I'm going to need help from..." He suddenly stopped. He got excited, and his enthusiasm had made him speak faster and louder, thinking about starting right away all the preparations the same night. But right then, he was hanging out with his two best friends. They were supposed to spend the whole day together. Lincoln, he looked at Ronnie Ann, who was smiling at him with some sad eyes but full of understanding. "If you need to go, then go. But today was supposed to be our day." "We can wait, buddy," Clyde assured him, wearing practically the same face as Ronnie Ann. "Your sister needs you more than us. Family's always first," completed the girl. Lincoln stretched both arms and surrounded his friends' necks, taking them by surprise when he dragged them closer to hug them. They wasted no time and hugged him back. "I love you guys," he said from his very soul. "We love you too," they both answered back. He stood up and took out his phone. He needed a ride to the other side of town, and although he didn't want to take advantage of her promise, he needed to ask a favor to one of his sisters. So he opened up the chat with his oldest sister and sent her a first message. "Hey, Lori." He wanted to send her next a "Are you busy? Can I ask you a favor?" But he was in the middle of writing it when the app confirmed that his sister had seen the message, and a fraction of a second later, his phone started vibrating with an incoming call from Lori Loud. "Lori?" he asked when he answered the call. "Lincoln, where are you? Did something happen? Are you okay?" He had to move away the phone from his ear to prevent any kind of serious damage. Ryan chuckled, seeing that. "Lori, it's okay. I'm alright." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." He heard a big sigh and put the phone closer to his ear once again. "I'm sorry, I saw your message and, well, it doesn't matter." "Lori, are you doing something? I mean, are you busy right now?" "No, Lincoln, I'm not busy. What do you need?" "Well, I mean, if you're not busy, do you think you could pick me up in the park? I need you to give me a ride somewhere. Pretty please? He asked, trying to sound as polite as possible. He heard the sound of dangling keys, some quick steps, what seemed to be the sound of metal hitting another metal, and an engine being turned on.